CBS 8's Jenny Day. Welcome to Around San Diego. So glad to have you with me. I'll get you caught up on a week's worth of news and look ahead in just 30 minutes. We do start, though, on a very somber note. Lunar New Year festivities were held across the country and are being used as a way to show solidarity for Asian communities rattled by this past weekend's mass shooting. Hundreds of people attended a Lunar New Year celebration at the Old Globe Theater on Monday. It kicked off with a traditional lion dance. The event organizers and many attendees hope to use this festivity to create a sense of community.
There is a lot of anger and sadness out there. Like Thelma said, it's still important that we come together because that's how we're going to heal and move on.
Yeah, the Old Globe hosts events every month celebrating different cultures and communities. You can find more information on CBS8.com. So what's happened has devastated many Asian Americans who culturally don't share their grief easily. Many feel too ashamed and proud to seek mental health help, which can lead to events like this and make it tough to cope. CBS 8's Abby Black explains what's being done to break those barriers.
3 mass shootings in 1 week in California, and 2, the suspected gunmen are Asian.
It's an Asian male and it's an elderly person, right? And they are even further isolated, as if it wasn't already difficult enough being an Asian American to talk about mental health. These are two parts of that special demographic that are further isolated and removed and have barriers to seeking mental health.
Dr. Richard Moon is a doctor of internal medicine at Kaiser Permanente in San Diego and says not only does he see the challenges in Asian American patients seeking mental health help, but also in his Korean American culture.
We don't recognize it, or we're told not to talk about it as a modeled minority. And so it comes out sideways in different ways as irritability or anger or depression or worse.
API community leaders echo Dr. Moon's concerns. This Sunday, they'll be holding a town hall.
We don't even have time to breathe. We don't have time to breathe and exhale. And we're just trying to be there for each other right now.
Corinne Makapugai serves on the California Commission on Asian Pacific Islander Affairs. She and AAPI community leader Joanne Field says grieving can be difficult in their communities. They say it's known as the model minority myth.
This myth that we're doing good when really we're not. Our community is struggling quite a bit.
People think that we're okay. You're affluent. You have good grades. You own businesses. But there are a lot of stressors and challenges that seem silent.
They're planning Sunday's town hall and working with the county to offer mental health resources. But it's also a call to action from officials, such as creating more targeted programs and a response from people with knowledgeable cultural sensitivity.
We have to have an action plan, not just a conversation, to better serve our community for a safer San Diego and just whole community.
Part of that change is helping people know there's no shame in asking for help.
If you're out there with trauma or anxiety or depression, don't feel like you have to go through it by yourself. We see you. We see the heaviness and the weight and the burden. You don't have to do this by yourself.
So important. Abby, thanks again. Sunday's town hall is scheduled at the San Diego Police Multicultural Center in City Heights at noon. If you don't feel comfortable attending, we will stream it live on our website, CBS8.com. Staying on topic, it's a statistic that nobody can be proud of here in San Diego. Hate crimes in our communities are skyrocketing. Hate crimes across San Diego were up 65% last year. Shannon Handy now has details about a specific hate crime that was recently prosecuted and how the city is responding to that rise.
That incident happened here outside the Crest Cafe in July of 2021. Cameron James knocked over tables, used slurs, and he even drew a swastika on the window. City leaders say his conviction sends a strong message.
And we take hate crimes very seriously because sometimes they're the first step towards an escalation.
San Diego City Attorney Mara Elliott says what happened outside the Crest Cafe in Hillcrest back in July of 2021 is just one example of the nearly 24 hate crimes her office has prosecuted over the past few years.
We have prosecuted 23 cases over 3 years. And that number is both high and it's low.
Low, she says, because she suspects people aren't reporting hate crimes as much as they should. In this particular case, Cameron James was seen lighting a fire near the Crest Cafe. An employee ran to put the fire out, at which point it escalated.
This person went back over, followed him to the cafe, made a ruckus, called him some derogatory terms that indicated that it was based on hate.
James used a slur that defames people within the LGBTQ community. He also threatened and threw a chair at the victim, leaving a visible injury as seen in this picture. Not only that, but he also drew a swastika on the window.
He said when it came to the swastika, I am German, and I am an admitted racist, and I did the swastika.
James pleaded guilty to misdemeanor battery with a hate crime allegation and interfering with a business. The judge denied probation and sentenced him to 273 days in jail. The victim in this case is a heterosexual Hispanic man. By phone, he told me he hadn't heard about the conviction yet, but was happy the case was finalized. Prosecuting hate crimes has become a focus for Elliott and other city leaders, especially now as new numbers reveal there was a 65% increase in hate crimes citywide in 2022, something Mayor Todd Gloria testified about during a hate crimes forum in Washington, D.C. last week.
Last year, our overall crime rate fell 7.5%. Our violent crime rate went down 13%, and yet our hate crimes went up 65%.
I caught up with Gloria today, and like Elliott, he too hopes this latest conviction will serve as a reminder to anyone committing a hate crime in San Diego.
We will prosecute you. We will put you in jail. It is unacceptable. There's no place for hate in our city.
If you've been the victim of a hate crime, the city attorney's office has a list of resources that can help, including how to report it. Just log on to CBS8.com and click on this story. For CBS 8, I'm Shanna Handy.
So how will state leaders respond to these shootings? Our political reporter Morgan Reiner spent the day with state Senate Republicans and asked them about addressing gun violence when they introduced their list of legislative priorities.
Republicans did list crime as a top priority, but they spoke more about early releases, fentanyl, human trafficking. So I did ask them specifically if they think more needs to be done to address mass shootings and gun violence. Overall, though, today, Republicans are just hoping that Democrats are willing to work with them on some of the state's biggest issues like housing and homelessness.
No one should have to go through what Brett Bowman has.
My wife, my children's mother, committed suicide in 2009. A couple years later, I lost my son. He was hit and killed crossing the street in the crosswalk.
Depression took over, and that's when the drinking started.
Started using meth, and it was downhill from there. I lost my job in 2 months, out of a place to live because I couldn't pay rent. My children were gone. They were taken.
He was homeless for 2 years, and he said handouts made it easier.
Nobody really wants to seek treatment when it's too easy to stay on the street. There's too many free programs, too much free bedding, free clothing, free food.
Said it's the accountability that made him favor the Republican plan and why he stood next to them as they introduced their legislative priorities for the 2023 session.
Our state is on an unsustainable path as it is right now. Homelessness is spiraling out of control. Public safety is anything but that. The cost of living in this state is too damn high.
Republican caucus leader, San Diego Senator Brian Jones, walked through their plans. Affordability.
We are proposing an increase to the state renter's tax credit, working to streamline housing construction by reforming CEQA.
CEQA is the environmental regulations that can delay projects by years. Crime.
Human trafficking or dealing fentanyl to our school children are not held fully accountable for their actions. That's why we are introducing a measure to ensure the punishment matches the severity and seriousness of these two issues.
With back-to-back mass shootings, I asked if they think more needs to be done to address gun violence, in addition to mental health.
To make possession with a ghost gun a felony. Well, we presented that on the floor of the Senate, and every single one of our Democratic colleagues voted against that.
I reached out to Pro Tem Senator Toni Atkins to respond to what Republicans had to say, but I was told she was too busy to give me a statement today. But when it comes to the homeless crisis and accountability, Governor Gavin Newsom himself has said that there wasn't any for far too long. It's why he held back funding from local cities until they came up with a better plan to address the crisis. It's why he came up with his Care Corps proposal to address mental health in the homeless population. It's something that Brett himself told me that he does like.
Meantime, Larry Miliete is going to stand trial for the murder of his missing wife, Maya Miliete. The judge made that decision on Wednesday after the 10th and final day of Miliete's preliminary hearing. The judge says even without a body, there's enough evidence to put the case before a jury. Over the last 2 weeks, we've heard from dozens of witnesses. Maya's sister, Mira Chris, has been there every day and expressed shock over what she learned.
That my sister had suffered so much. I didn't know that. I wish I could have known. I could probably help her better. But she's very independent. She's very smart. But I wish I could have done something.
After the judge's decision, Larry pleaded not guilty. The jury trial will begin on September 14th. Be sure to stay with CBS 8 for updates on this case as it moves to trial. We'll have the latest developments posted on social media, of course, CBS8.com and the CBS 8 app. Heavy news week for sure. Well, the man who sold a deadly dose of fentanyl to a Coronado high school student was sentenced to more than a decade behind bars. CBS 8's Rocio De La Fe has reaction from the victim's family.
I know he's with God right now, and that gives me peace.
Family members of Clark Salveron stood outside the courtroom after learning the fate of the drug dealer responsible for the 15-year-old's death.
A broken heart is not nearly what you experience when you go through this type of tragedy.
Salveron died in May of 2021 after buying what he thought were oxycodone pills. He got them from then 21-year-old Kalar Jr. to Juan Beltran-Lapp, who prosecutors say sold the drugs on Instagram.
The drug dealer advertised online. So if you have an individual who's willing to actually go on Snapchat or Instagram and put this poison into the community, our office is going to hold that individual accountable.
Beltran-Lapp pleaded guilty last year and admitted he had warned the teen to only take half the pill because of how strong it was. He was arrested after Salveron's death with more fentanyl-laced pills in his possession.
We had 814 deaths last year. It is the #1 cause of death for individuals between 18 and 45. It is an epidemic of proportions that we haven't seen in this district.
Today was difficult, but I feel relieved that it's done.
Family members say the Coronado High School sophomore dedicated his life to family, sports, and his faith.
He was everything to me. He was very special, sweet boy, and he was a leader, and he was a gift. He was a gift for 15 years, and I wish I could have had him longer.
Salveron's family are now warning other parents to talk with their children to prevent a similar tragedy from happening.
It's very, very, very scary of what our world is becoming with fentanyl. They just need to be aware of this, how scary it is.
No justice can ever satisfy the loss that a grandparent has or a parent has, because this fellow will be away for a few years, but Clark is gone forever.
Yeah, Beltran-Lapp will now serve the next 13 years behind bars, plus an additional 5 years of supervised release. Well, people with loved ones who died while in custody at San Diego County jails came together to demand an audience and answers from Sheriff Kelly Martinez. Those families gathered at the Sheriff's Department headquarters to speak out. CBS 8's Kirsten Holmes was also there.
My brother could still be alive if the sheriffs were doing their job properly, and Kelly Martinez will not meet with us.
That's Sabrina Weddle. You may remember her from this protest months ago surrounding jail deaths.
I'm f***ing mad! Want answers? I'm not the only family up here either!
Sabrina's brother Saxon Rodriguez died in San Diego Central Jail from overdose. Sabrina and son Dee, Saxon's mom, says he should have never had access to fentanyl behind bars. And now all they're left with are questions.
Officers working on the 4th floor got to go home and tuck their kids into bed, and I was planning a funeral for a 22-year-old boy. He had a really bright, positive outlook on life. He loved to be out and about, and he was friends to all. Nobody could say anything bad about Saxon.
We are seeing here in San Diego County somebody who lied to get elected. Kelly Martinez promised to release that information at least to the family members They deserve and they have a right to know what happened to their loved ones.
Dave Martinez, a former local sheriff's deputy, and the North County Equity and Justice Coalition says Sheriff Martinez has denied their request to meet with families and discuss reforms. In a statement to CBS 8 News, the Sheriff's Department says in part, quote, "In sincerest consideration and respect for their loss, the sheriff would like to meet with the families individually. An intimate and compassionate setting will provide the bereaved with information as well as enough time to answer their questions and listen to their feedback regarding jail operations." These family members say that's not enough.
If I'd have known how she was going to act, I probably wouldn't have voted for her.
You have all heard these families all suggesting things. We're not just out here barking in the wind. We're all suggesting things that will prevent other mothers, other sisters, other fathers, other family members from losing loved ones in custody.
Yeah, that was our Kirsten Holmes there reporting. And Sheriff Martinez did also say that she established a liaison from the sheriff's office to assist grieving families with their cases on in-custody deaths. You can read their response to the North County Justice Coalition and their statement to us, again, on our website, cbs8.com. Well, activists are still rallying against plans to build a 30-foot border wall at Friendship Park. The park's existing fence has been deteriorating. Advocates say that they want it to be repaired, not replaced. The new wall would completely separate the park's U.S. side from the Mexico side. The chain-link fence at Friendship Park has allowed families on both sides of the border to meet face-to-face for generations. And more than 1,500 volunteers hit the streets around the county on Thursday morning to get an updated count on how many people are experiencing homelessness. They fanned out across 36 locations for the point-in-time count. Mayor Todd Gloria says that it was about more than just counting how many people live on the street.
It's really sitting down and having a conversation with them and getting a rich data set of understanding, are you a veteran? What health conditions do you have? Are you experiencing mental illness or addiction concerns?
Yeah, data from this week will come out sometime in May. It will impact how much federal funding San Diego will get for outreach services. And this week also marked the opening of a new homeless shelter at the Old Central Library. The 36-bed shelter operates at night and will exclusively serve women, particularly for those who reside in and around downtown. It's being operated by the National Alliance for Mental Illness of San Diego and Imperial Counties. The city of San Diego now has nearly 1,800 beds in its shelter network. And almost 3 years after it was first instated, San Diego's COVID-19 state of emergency will come to an end on February 28th. On Tuesday, San Diego City Council voted unanimously to take this step, along with ending its controversial vaccine mandate for city workers. Now, this also ends the state of emergency at the end of February. It will align the city with both the county and the state. City leaders say that a sharp reduction in COVID case numbers locally has enabled San Diego to take this step, while also pointing to the city's vaccine requirement for employees as effective and successful.
91% of the city workforce has been vaccinated, has stayed healthy, and been able to come to work every day. It's protected us at the city, it's protected our residents, and protected each other's colleagues.
Yes, city leaders also point out that even with the state of emergency ending, people are still vulnerable to COVID, emphasizing the importance of getting vaccinated and boosted. And the FDA, in the meantime, is hoping to simplify its approach to COVID vaccinations. A panel voted to transition to single vaccine composition. Instead of different versions for primary and booster doses, the committee also talked about possibly moving to annual boosters like flu shots. That would mean assessing what COVID strains are circulating in June and then preparing a dose for the fall. Well, now to our active weather. City crews are evaluating wind conditions and damage to determine if it's safe to reopen several city parks. This came after Santa Ana winds toppled over 36 trees on Thursday in Balboa Park. The city's Parks and Recreation Department says a total of 35 trees, mostly eucalyptus, were uprooted during these high winds. A woman was also seriously injured while walking her dog after a tree came crashing down down on her. The incident prompted the park's closure of Balboa Park, the golf course there, Presidio Park, and Choyas Lake, where they were also closed there as a precaution.
Saw winds that were in excess of 20 to 40 miles an hour through the park. And as a result of us having a very large forest within Balboa Park, we wanted to evaluate those trees.
Every time when there's a big windstorm, you see a lot of leaves, you see, big branches come down. But this is absolutely the worst that we've seen. We've never seen these huge eucalyptus come down like that.
Yeah, it really was intense. So officials say the last time the city was forced to close Balboa Park was in the late 90s when around 45 trees came down during another windstorm. Well, now to the video that we all can't stop looking at. Mother Nature flexing her muscle and bringing down huge chunks of the cliffs at Black's Beach. And it could happen again, worse this time at really any second. CBS 8's Sean Stiles is working for you to show us just how dangerous the situation is becoming.
This stretch of beach from Torrey Pines State Beach all the way down to Black's is normally one continuous beach. But because of the bluff collapse that took place late last week, the two beaches now are cut in half. And some that make their way down here almost on a daily basis are saying this is the biggest bluff collapse they've ever seen.
And it's really quite dramatic. Like, there was a lot of rock that came down, and a lot of sand that came down from real far back. Being right here, like in front of it, the magnitude of the collapse is kind of crazy.
Ezra Kozviner has been surfing Black's Beach for more than 15 years and told me he's never seen a bluff collapse this big. While in the water, he could see the bluffs aren't done moving.
While I was out there, I was looking back at the cliffs, and there's a lot more that can still come down.
The city of San Diego has had geologists on site and are sending another team to determine how to keep the area safe. I spoke with Mike Jensen, a geologist for the city, and he said this area had previously slid in the 80s. The heavy rains, though, we've seen over the past couple weeks, and the big surf is likely what caused the bluff to fail. In fact, Ezra saw parts of the bluff that are past the tipping point.
Some of the parts of the cliffs, they're reaching over almost, like they're about to collapse. So there's I think this is going to be a lot of cliff falling, especially in this area, real soon.
And because of that, those heading down to the beach need to stay away from the base of the bluffs as the signs warn. And remember, the slide area is still active.
Yeah, you can't run. It just happens. It happens so fast. You can't run from it. You can't predict it. Just, keep your eye out, have common sense, stay away from the unstable looking cliffs.
More rain is in the long-range forecast, and with these bluffs continuing to be unstable and collapsing, the best thing you can do is not do that and stay as far away from it as possible. Sean Stiles, Earth 8.
Yeah, really, truly stay safe out there. We're so used to sunny and 70, right? Well, the Marine Room restaurant in La Jolla has also made waves across San Diego for its picturesque coastal views. Sean now looks at how the restaurant gives customers up close and personal views of waves thrashing against our beautiful coast.
If you've ever been to the Marine Room restaurant, you know the food's great here. But the waves are what is the big attraction. In the past king tide, the waves were crashing over this building. We've got some great video. We'll show you that in just a second. But how do the waves stay out there? Well, we're going to answer that question.
Having the tide break off the windows, it's truly inspiring. We literally are in the surf. I mean, at times we become the submarine room.
The Kellogg family founded the La Jolla Beach and Tennis Club in the 1930s. William Kellogg is the current president.
There's a great picture upstairs of my grandfather with his pant legs rolled up behind that bar with the water and the furniture floating in here. He was serving drinks to the people.
That was in 1941, the first time the ocean came in. The restaurant was rebuilt, but because of World War II, bulletproof glass was installed in the restaurant, and you guessed it, the Marine Room was bulletproof. Just not ocean-proof. Fast forward 40 years to 1982 at a tennis tournament.
And I was at the tournament desk at about 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning, and I got a call, water seeping into the Marine Room.
Mother Nature would not be denied.
at some point, they just basically popped out.
But this time, it wasn't the glass that failed.
It was really because the salt water had corroded the steel I-beams.
It took 9 months to rebuild, that time with reinforced steel covered with gunite, which is used in swimming pools, and even better bulletproof glass.
It was a 2-ply, 3/4 inch plus 1/4 inch that was bonded together.
So if you're doing the math, that was 40 years, and the Marine Room is due. But Kellogg says the design along the footing is part of the reason the building has survived.
They built the seawalls in a curve. You actually use the wave power to offset what's coming in.
If you're looking to get in on this high tide dining experience here at the Marine Room, they're going to resume having high tide dinners come June. And I got to tell you, if you're thinking about it, make plans now. We'll send it back to you in the studio.
I'll take it, Sean. Thanks. Such a cool spot. Well, Vice President Kamala Harris was just in California visiting a groundwater recharge center, talking about efforts to store water for the dry season. We have seen so much recent rain, and now lawmakers are trying to figure out the best way to capture that water so that we can use it later. Again, Morgan Reiner has been looking into what's being done and what else is needed.
The governor's press office sent out an email yesterday titled "The 5 Ways California is Storing Water from These Winter Storms." And then a few hours later, Republicans sent out an email titled "The 5 Ways California is Failing to Store Water from These Winter Storms."
California was inundated with rain over the last few weeks.
Water flowing to the ocean.
And Republicans like Senator Brian Daly were quick to say the state should be doing more to store the water to use in dry times.
Yes, we need to invest in our infrastructure.
Director of the California Department of Water Resources, Carla Nemeth, told reporters the state does need better infrastructure to capture the water, which she says the state is working on. In this email Thursday, Newsom says the state invested $8.6 billion over the last 2 budget cycles alone to expand groundwater recharge capacity.
We must have the ability to diversify our approach.
Like the project Vice President Kamala Harris visited Friday, the Delta Tunnel, which will help store excess water and divert it to Southern California, and other projects. So what is the biggest complaint from Republicans?
We spend the money to do all the work, but we never actually get the project. That's the point that all of my 5 points are trying to bring out.
That the 7 water storage projects voters approved funding for back in 2014 are taking too long to complete, specifically the Sites Reservoir.
Let's fast track this just like we do for sports arenas.
The Sites Reservoir put out an analysis that said if they were operational over just the last 2 weeks, they could have stored water from more than 2 million farms, businesses, and people.
Which we know, based on last year, is absolutely needed.
I went straight to the director of the project to ask why it's taking so long.
We're currently in the process of securing some critical permits, doing some engineering field evaluations to confirm our construction cost estimate, and lining up our financing. And those are all parts of what are necessary to actually construct the project of this magnitude.
The governor created a strike team last year to expedite the process, something Director Jerry Brown says is about to pay off.
Those 7 projects take time, and they're supposed to be completed by 2030. The Sites Reservoir told me today it's looking more like 2031 for them. But the governor's press office sent me another statement today saying that the projects that are currently in place and operational in California were able to store trillions of gallons of water over the last few weeks. They said the 2 largest reservoirs in the state were able to store enough water to serve 5.6 million households in California for a year.
Well, some good news now from San Clemente Island just off of our coast. 5 different species, 4 plants, and 1 bird have been taken off of the endangered list. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service says that the San Clemente Island paintbrush, the lotus, larkspur, bush mallow plants, and the San Clemente bell sparrow are fully recovered. That's great news.
This is the 50th anniversary of the Endangered Species Act. And we are on track to down or delist species periodically for the next year. So this is the first of what we intend to be many celebrations throughout the year.
Yeah, so to give us a closer look at some of the species being delisted, the Navy invited our Brian White on a tour of San Clemente Island to showcase the conservation efforts that are happening there.
While 4 plants and 1 bird are coming off the endangered species list, the Navy flew me out to San Clemente Island to see for myself, and they took me on a hiking tour.
This is what makes us get up and come to work in the morning as biologists.
50 years after the Endangered Species Act became law, biologists here on San Clemente Island are celebrating the delisting of 5 species at once.
The species are recovering, the habitats are expanding.
Melissa Booker is a wildlife biologist for the Navy, and she's thrilled to see the San Clemente Island bell sparrow taken off the list.
It is an adorable little songbird. It has 2 dark sort of mustache lines, a black spot on a white chest.
At one point, there were only 34 of these birds left in the wild, which are only found on this island, and now there are up to 6,000 of them.
Things are going well, but it's not the end of the story. We'll continue to do our counts of how many birds are on the island every year.
Even with a portion of San Clemente Island being used for military training exercises, it's the most botanically unique of all the California Channel Islands. But the plants and shrubs have overcome some huge obstacles. The island used to be filled with feral goats, which devoured most of the plant life.
Where we're standing right here, there was not a single shrub 30 years ago. The goats had obliterated this island.
Brian Munson is the botany program manager for Naval Base Coronado, and he says the goat population here was removed by the year 1991.
When the Navy removed the goats 30 years ago, the shrubs that were confined to the cliffs crept up and colonized this entire area.
He led me on a hiking tour to see some of the plant species being delisted.
This is a San Clemente Island broom down here, that plant with the yellow flowers.
First listed in 1977 when there were only 1,000 of these plants, there are now 20,000 of them across the island.
This is the San Clemente Island paintbrush. I've done this hike dozens of times, and there's more plants here today than I remember.
The San Clemente Island bush mallow is now thriving with thousands across the island, but when it was listed in 1977, there was only one location where it was known to be.
And that was actually in a junk pile. The pile of junk actually protected the plant from the goats.
Through its partnership with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the U.S. Navy and its team of conservationists are proud of the work being done.
The fact that it's going in a positive trajectory is really meaningful. So to be a part of a program where things are actually recovering and getting taken off the endangered species list is personally very rewarding.
On San Clemente Island, Brian White, CBS 8.
Boy, that is good news. Happy to share it with you. Well, how about this debate? Has tipping gotten out of control? Many Americans think that it has, with some saying that they feel pressured to throw in a tip. So what's acceptable and where do you draw the line? CBS 8's Rocio De La Fe talks to an etiquette expert to find out what's expected the next time you're at the cash register.
As more businesses set up digital payment methods, customers are now being asked to leave a tip in places where they normally wouldn't. The issue has many people asking themselves, how much is too much?
It's being called tipflation, and there's no escaping it. It's the term used to describe tip requests at checkout.
So we're living in an era of inflation, but on top of that, we've got tipping everywhere, tipflation. I take it a step further and call it a tipping invasion, because that's really what I think it is.
Consumers everywhere say they're fed up with being asked to leave gratuity, even when it seems no service was actually done.
They're just getting paid hourly, and they're just behind a counter handing you something, just doing their job. I don't really think it deserves much more of what they're already getting paid for.
I think tipping at every turn is definitely out of control. So this is
etiquette expert Thomas Farley says part of the problem is that most businesses now have a virtual tip jar that has made it easier than ever to tip workers. But he says consumers shouldn't feel pressured into tipping.
So we know about a guilt trip. This is the guilt tip, where because you know you've got to flip that screen around ultimately, and the person waiting on you is going to see how much you tipped. Not to mention the 3 people standing in line behind you are going to see what you tipped.
This comes as the minimum wage in San Diego rose to $16.30. It's now $15.50 across the state.
But these individuals who are working a cash register, they are being paid a livable wage for that industry. As opposed to somebody who's a server in a restaurant, those tips are truly the only means of getting them up to a livable wage.
Farley says not only has it gone too far, but he fears it's going to get even worse.
Suddenly, every service professional in our life is being tipped. The people who we traditionally do tip and require those tips, they're going to be getting a smaller piece of the pie.
Where's it going to stop?
Etiquette experts say it's important to continue tipping service workers. That includes servers, drivers, salon workers, and others. And that it's up to you to decide whether you want to leave a tip at the register. If you're not interested in tapping to add a tip, you can try to pay with cash instead. Rocio de la Fe, CBS 8.
Yeah, interesting conversation. A lot of back and forth happening on our Facebook page. I leave you now, though, with a look at the 2023 Farmers Insurance Open. 156 golfers competed for a share of an $8.7 million purse. The tournament, of course, held there at Torrey Pines. As always, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for staying informed. Join me each week as I take you around San Diego. For CBS 8, I'm Jenny Day. Take good care of yourself.